Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to another panel on MercadoMedia. Today, we're covering the very latest in the war in Ukraine, from major new proposals out of Russia and Europe to economic negotiations involving the United States. There's a lot to break down, and we've got an amazing panel here today to do so. We're also raising money tonight for our Easter truck fundraiser, a real truck going to the Ukrainian defenders for medevac, mobility, and survival. Link is pinned in the chat and in the descriptions. All right, so let's go around and do one by one. I'm just going to do it based upon how I see it, no specific order. Let's start with Greg Terry. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the panel.
My name's Greg, and just happy to be here, friends with all of these guys, and it's just a joy to stand for what's right and lend our voice, come from different perspectives, but find out we agree on much more than we disagree on. That's the best picture of it all. So I'm honored to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Let's go with Georgie's from K Manners.
Hey, I welcome my friends. My name is Artur. No, just representing Artur here. Yes, big props to Artur. But my name is Georgie. I'm from Ukraine Matters. I'm a war commentator, big supporter of Ukraine, big promoter, a person that yells for a living, I guess.
And you do a great job doing so. Dylan Burns.
I'm Dylan. I'm a political commentator and war journalist, and I've been working on a lot of small independent films covering the war in Ukraine on the ground. And I'm releasing a new one this Sunday on the Human Safari in Kherson, where we present a lot of the footage that the Russians released themselves, as well as talking to the victims firsthand and showing their injuries, talking to ambulance crews who have been bombed, and presenting the testimony. So I hope you check it out.
Absolutely. And last but not least, Operator Starsky.
Hello, my friends. I'm Operator Starsky. I'm a Ukrainian veteran, 10 years in service. Currently, I'm working as co-founder of the Propaganda Study Institute, trying to debunk Russian bullshit, and an observer and journalist at UA TV. Nice to see you, my friends.
And thank you so much for joining us, guys, and spending your time here on MercadoMedia today. Also, all of their YouTube channels, because they are all YouTubers, they're pinned in the description of the video. They're hyperlinks. So all you got to do is just click it, and then it takes you right to their channel. It's literally one click, not hard, and then subscribe. So it's 2 clicks. All right, let's do an opening discussion. No, anybody can chime in any order. I'll try to regulate it. From your guys' perspective, what's the most urgent or underreported issue in Ukraine right now at this very moment? Anyone?
Well, one of the things that I personally see is not a lot of people talk about the. Let's put it this way, and I think that Conchita Wurst will also support me with this, because Conchita Wurst today will work as, our protector against Russian spirit, because Russians hate this person so much they cannot stand, But one way or another, regarding Ukrainian situation, regarding the strikes that keep happening every single night, Russians keep lying that they were not attacking Ukraine since 18th of March, which is a complete bullshit. One thing that triggers me over and over again is that representatives of the Trump administration keep repeating Russian lies that Russia is a peaceful country that doesn't strike Ukraine. Whatever happens in Ukraine, nobody knows, meteorites falling. But one very important thing regarding the negotiations that took place between United States and between the Russian terrorists, when terrorists asked them to lift the sanctions placed on their financial institutions. Conchita, I think you can go.
Thanks, Conchita.
Thanks, Conchita. See you later. Which were placed on their financial institutions. And one of the reasons why Russians started talking about the agricultural sector, about their fertilizer, is basically they try to position themselves as a peaceful country that only wants to feed everybody, come on, food, products, you know. The main reason why they started promoting this lifting sanctions from their financial institution is literally because they want a broader lift of sanctions that would include lifting sanctions from Russian oligarchs and Russian companies that service and facilitate Russian war machine. Also, there were several investigations conducted over time on Russian so-called agricultural export and all the ships that were involved in shipping weapons and stolen Ukrainian grain. So this is something very important to remember. Russia is trying to manipulate the topic of the food security, global food crisis and things like that. And they want to position themselves as peace-loving nation. But the main thing that they want to achieve is lifting sanctions from their financial institutions, because this will increase the Russian income that will be spent on the Russian war machine tenfold. As of this moment, Russians are able to like their whole, I forgot the English word, but they make transactions on a monthly basis that are worth approximately $10-11 billion, and they can grow this number to like $100 billion monthly. So this is something that will definitely prolong the war, increase Russian chances on acquiring new territories in Ukraine, build new weapons, new missiles, and new drones that will be hitting Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. That is the first thing that I wanted to mention. Another thing that I wanted to mention was that according to the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Presidential Office of Ukraine, Mr. Zhovkva, Russians completely abandoned, completely rejected the idea of discussing, of halting the strikes on civilian objects in Ukraine. So basically they discussed halting of the strikes on oil refineries, of course, gas transferring facilities, of course, but when they were offered to discuss like what to do with the strikes on the civilian objects, including hospitals, kindergartens, schools, and apartment buildings, Russians rejected this idea completely. So this is another thing to remember. So it's everything that I wanted to mention so far.
Well, for me, I'll make it easy because I can jump right off of what Starsky was saying there. But he had 2 points, and we've already run out of time. So I have 3 points. So we'll definitely be out of time. The other thing was funny. You, Merc, and I, we both took a drink at the same exact second.
I noticed
Yeah,
that.
I was weirded out. First of all, I would say for me, it is jumping off on what Starsky said there is the lack of understanding of how much destruction and devastation is happening off of the zero line. When we look at cities like Sumy and Kharkiv, of course, and then come down through Izum, then the Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, Druzhkivka, Konstantinivka circle, wrapping around Nikopol, Zaporizhia, down to Kherson. It's nonstop. And like right now, 20 shaheeds going in center of Dnipro again. And there's like just complete carelessness and disregard. And I'm really coming from the American perspective here. And then that launches me into my next topic, my next point, where I'm disgusted by the carelessness of the Trump administration and the USA leadership. I'm disgusted by the lack of understanding and knowledge by envoys that are clueless, that are oligarchs within themselves, and that have no business sitting down at a table to try to have a conversation with Vladimir Putin. And I'm referring directly to Stephen Witkoff. Breaking news in about the last 10 or 15 minutes is Trump in the Oval Office just stating that he's just learning that Iranian shaheeds are being used in Ukraine. So we're going to have to take a look into that and see what's going on, because we know on other topics that the United States is getting ready to probably unleash a pretty large attack on Iran. It's easy to see it's coming. But now he's literally, guys, you'll see this after this stream. Go look it up. He just said reports are coming in. Okay, so what that tells me is not only are we careless, but we're uninformed and we have no sense of the reality of what is happening in Ukraine. So those are the two things for me right now. And then the third one for me is the mineral deal.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the mineral deal is the United States trying to rape Ukraine. There's no other word I can use there.
Mm-hmm.
And the disgusting way it is being unfolded, of course, Zelensky rejecting it tonight, nothing official, but he's already come out with this statement, says, okay, what is this a joke? But the United States comes and says, oh, we're so close. Basically the pens are in the hand and the ink is warm. But there is nothing here advantageous for Ukraine on this minerals deal. So for me, it's very, very poor showing from my government, and it's disgusting that we would try to literally take advantage of a war-torn nation versus doing everything to stand for justice and liberty and truth and destruction. So, or stand against destruction. So those are my three things, and I'll throw it around.
Absolutely, Greg. Before we get to Dylan and Georgie's is so kindly offered to answer any questions while others are talking in the chat. So he's responding. And of course, any questions you guys have for the panelists, I will address at the very end. And I'll read you guys' super chats at the very end. Okay, so Georgie's or Dylan, from your perspective, what's the most urgent or underreported issue in Ukraine right now? Either one.
Okay, yeah, I'll take it. So for me, it's kind of like more of a theme and a topic rather than specific issue. My biggest kind of pet peeve is the perception of Russia that it has been fighting for 3 years like this, it can continue fighting on like this. And the problem that I see, and because I listen to a lot of the analysts, a lot of the experts coming to BBC, Times Radio, LBC, whatever, Fox News, you name it, literally anything. And it's always like discussion. Russia has been fighting this war for 3 years. They can truly go forward as much as they can, completely ignoring the fact that the way why Russia was fighting this was because A, they had a huge war chest that they accumulated through the super profits from the selling of their natural resources, gas, oil, and so on, and it was put in a war chest that was running this whole time. So when we're talking about the Russian population, if they're tired from war, if they're ready to stop the war, Russian population hasn't really felt it, because any kind of expenses for the Russian economy has been paid off by the war chest expenses. 2025, the last year for the Russian war chest. Already we see the first 2 months, their budget deficit is skyrocketing, like it's going to the stratosphere, and it's completely depleting that war chest. So Russia will start cutting into their economy, and Russian population only by the end and the start of 2026 will finally start feeling the pain of war, because the pain is immense. The amount of money that Russia is spending to fight this war is stupendous. And that's not being treated as so that the Russians have felt this way. And the same goes also for the military aspect, that it is presumed like, oh, Russia has been fighting this war. They have been sending these non-stop troops dying and so on, completely disregarding that they've been burning through the stockpiles of a past superpower, world's second superpower, that has been accumulating equipment for over 50 years to fight the rest of the world. And it burned it all in 3 years fighting just Ukraine with some help from the allies. Very minimal help, I might add. Like let's not start all of this topic, but the amount of help that was given to Ukraine was very, very small. And the fact is, like, the biggest, I'm going to put just one number here because it's the most recent one. There is this OSINT analyst, Jumpy. He's basically counting how many pieces of equipment there are on different bases. And he stated, like, latest that he was counted was the towed artillery systems, like how many towed artillery systems there are. He said at the start of the war, there was counted, Russia had about 17,500 towed artillery systems. Right now at their stockpiles is 2,000. From 17,500 to 2,000. And those 2,000 most likely are like in such a condition that they're completely unusable. So the narrative that like Russia has fought this war like this for 3 years so it can just go on is completely flawed. And no amount of equipment that's been going to be sent by the North Koreans and so on. Like, okay, there is one option, is if the Chinese just start like full-blown sending stuff from their equipment storages. That's probably the only way. But other than that, no Russian production can sustain it. We see it already in the way that they're using the donkeys, they're using the light vehicles. Why they're using it? Well, because their production cannot sustain the tempo that they want to fight in. And I'm not going to say that it's going to be easier for Ukraine. It's not. The cost is immense. It's stupendous cost, like in manpower and resource and everything. And the dragging feet help from allies doesn't really help. But the point is, I'm really annoyed, and I feel it is underreported narrative that the way that the war has been fought up until this point is not the same that the war is going to be fought after that. Russia has never been in a situation that it is now and is finding it. It's running out of resources and it needs to do something, and it's just trying to survive somehow.
Absolutely.
Sorry, at the same time, bro, it's when you try to explain this to people, there's always some kind of bot in the chat who says, but Russia's winning territory every single day, you know? What would you explain to those people?
Well, it does win territory, but we're fighting the war of attrition. Like, I can go here long and talk about the doctrine of attrition, but I'm just going to go on the basis. Russia has not captured a single big city past basically the start of the war, and it was Kherson. And Kherson,
and what happened?
And from Kherson, they got kicked out. They tried going into Kharkiv, they got kicked out. They've captured, probably the biggest one was Bakhmut. It was like pre-war 70,000, and it cost Russia at that moment. There was this company, if you remember, Wagner military company, which was at that moment counted as Russian the top tier fighting force, like the best of the best. They were stating that they're going to be an army of their own after the war end. That was Prigozhin was telling. The fighting in that city not only like completely destroyed that whole military, but also like turned Prigozhin to go to fight Putin. Like we can talk like differently why he decided to suicide himself. But the point is, that was the Russian biggest achievement so far. Yes, they broke through Avdiivka, they captured those positions. There was a fuck up at Orcheretina. There was a issue with forces accumulating and moving to Pokrovsk. But that's it. Even Pokrovsk and Mirnograd is they're not even close to like semi-encirclement. They're not even there yet. Even Toretsk, which is relatively small city, the point is, over 3 years, we saw Russia doing a couple of phases of war. The first phase, there was a professional army, that came in, and then they got their ass kicked after Ukraine was able to mobilize. After that, Ukrainians started pushing Russians out of Ukraine, and that was the moment for the allies to kind of support Ukraine more. So then Ukraine would be able to completely expel Russians from Ukraine. But instead, we had a lull of deliveries of equipment, and Biden administration, that was the famous when the Putin says, I'm going to nuke everyone. So Biden administration said like, oh, we're going to want to prevent the nuclear war, and they're not going to send any kind of equipment. After that, there was a big discussion whether or not send equipment to Ukraine, tanks, armored vehicles, and so on. And then the Ukrainian offensive stalled, and they tried to like pick it up again next spring, but then it was again delayed. And Russia, in that meantime, built up like a whole bunch of defenses with their freshly mobilized forces. And then we entered this new type of war where Russia is mobilized and Ukraine is mobilized. And then Russia starts pulling everything from their stockpiles, literally everything. Like they're throwing, there's no tomorrow. And that is the type of war that Ukraine has been fighting. It has been tough. The resource advantage is immense. The pressure on Ukraine is immense. And the fact that Ukraine survived, lost only, sorry to all of the people in Ukraine, it's like relatively small and not the most critical points is really bad. And the fact that Russia is threatening Pokrovsk is bad. But this war is not for Pokrovsk. This war is not even for Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. This war is not even for Zaporizhia. This war is for Ukraine. And to say that for Russia to get to, for example, Kyiv, at least, that is a fever dream. So there is no military path for Russia. They fully mobilized all of their resources, and they were maximally able to capture Bakhmut, with the result of destroying their best units at that time.
Thank you, Georgie. Dylan.
1 second, I'm just checking something quick. Don't worry. 1 second, I'm definitely rechecking it.
Be happy.
Or we are 100% clean on OPSEC. I just wanted to make sure. So I mean, like when it comes to underreported stories, every time I come back to the United States, there's certain stories that I talk about, or I say, yeah, I filmed this or I filmed that, and people have no clue what's going on. I have yet to meet an American who knows what the human safari is. I have yet to meet a person in this country that I said the words human safari and they had any idea what I was talking about. I saw CNN released an article or a 5-minute segment on it a few days ago. I saw like a few articles get published, but how many people are reading print media? How many people saw CNN during that specific 5 minutes that they happen to be talking about it? Or hey, maybe they get in halfway through and they don't hear all the testimony. And maybe you hear something, but do you remember something? Has something been able to make an impression on you? You might read Human Safari in a byline somewhere, but there's a difference between hearing in Human Safari and seeing people hunted on bicycles, right? And so these tragedies, a lot of the worst tragedies of the war and atrocities and recent events, you can never talk about them enough. If you think you're talking about them enough, you're probably not. You can always mention them again. You can always highlight them again. You can always help try to bring attention to these things because most people don't know about the kidnapped children. There's more people who know about it because it's been talked about since the start, but the vast majority of people I've talked to don't know about the trafficked children. And you need to frame it that way too. You can't say, oh, the children that Russia took, the trafficked children that were stolen and taken away, and that which Save Ukraine is currently saying, the director of Save Ukraine, some of those people who were recruited when they were 14, 15, they're now getting military age, and the government's trying to press them into service. Now, this has been something that's been going on for forever, which scares people even more. The fact that it's been going on since 2014 that Russia's been forcing people in occupied territory to pick up guns. It's just this is the first time it was specifically trafficking victims that they're trying to get to pick up guns. So when you highlight this to people, when you show people as it is, I see so much revulsion that sometimes they don't even want to hear the end of the story. When I showed people in advance who don't know about the Human Safari clips from my documentary, they were disgusted. So I want more people on the ground covering the Human Safari. I want more people on the ground covering these things, highlighting these things, harassing podcasts, harassing TV shows, harassing news channels to get on, guilt them if you have to get on and highlight the fact that these things are happening, because it's the largest war in Europe since World War II, and I think we should know about its massacres. So that's definitely a big thing. Sanctions relief, also need to give a shout out to minefields. Ukraine's going to be a country stuffed to the brim with mines for the next probably 100 years. And so it's always going to need new mining equipment. It's going to need more drones to identify the mines. So this is something that's going to be a top tier issue for the next 60, 70, 80 years. I'll probably be dead before it's all dealt with. And so I'd like one day to make it so people can, walk around in their own forest again without fearing that they might kick the wrong rock. But yeah,
good call there, man.
Sanctions relief is the last thing. I don't want to, I could rant all day about all the things that aren't properly covered, but I think sanctions relief, the fact that it's being talked about so flippantly when that's unironically the most dangerous thing the United States could do, it's more dangerous than cutting aid. It's more dangerous than anything Trump has said about Zelensky or, reposting a story about a yacht or whatever it is, whatever he says. The cutting of the aid means American CNC machines, which are vital to Russian industry, can swarm into the country and help them replace machine components, help them replace the stuff in their industry that they've been covering up with duct tape and like chewing gum in order to make sure that they can keep the factories going. That's how you help expand production of drones. That's how you help expand production of artillery. That's how American capital gets itself bloody in the poppers fields of eastern Ukraine. And I don't want that to be the case. And so the only way it won't be the case is if you highlight it.
Starsky?
Yeah, I also wanted to add something. Lisbeth in the chat reminded me one thing that, again, is heavily underreported in any media here in Europe or in the United States, etc. Russians started utilizing the ISIS tactics of suicide bombers. So generally what they do is they hire people through messengers, offering them money. They give them detailed instructions on how to construct a bomb, and then they give them the target. The carrier brings the bomb to the target and then gets eliminated. So 2 months last month, 2 Ukrainian teenagers, I believe in Frankivsk, 15 and 17 years old were killed because they were hired by the Russian FSB. They delivered the bomb. The bomb went off, killing both teenagers. Several days ago in Odessa, a woman brought a plastic bag to the police department, and the bomb also went off. The woman died. 3 policemen were injured. But one of the absolutely craziest cases took place, I believe, in Ternopil, where a 14-year-old girl was detained by the police because she brought a bomb and planted the bomb under the vehicle. And luckily, the bomb was discovered. So the girl, 14 years old, she was detained. And the story is Russian FSB hacked her phone, found her private pictures, and they started blackmailing the girl, the teenager, with the fact that they will expose her pictures to the public if she doesn't do that. So they basically forced her to become a terrorist and make a bomb and plant the bomb. And this is some of the craziest moments that I've seen probably since, I don't know, since like strike on the children's hospital in Kiev, because in a normal country, law enforcement and secret services, they hunt pedophiles. They fight pedophiles. In Russia, the secret services and law enforcement are pedophiles themselves. And this is something so crazy that, you know, it still triggers me. And the fact that this girl could actually be also killed by this bomb, but apparently she did something like wrong, so it did not detonate, it did not destroy the target, and luckily she is alive. But because she agreed to participate in this terrorist act, she got detained by the law enforcement. This is how crazy they are. The borders between Russia, Taliban, ISIS, they don't exist anymore. They literally don't exist. Unfortunately, again, Trump administration will never see that. They will like voluntarily close their eyes in order not to see that. But we must talk about things like this because this is something absolutely insane.
Absolutely. Georgies? Oh, muted, buddy.
Fantastic point.
Muted, buddy.
Yeah, a follow-up to that, Starsky. Do they actually assemble the bombs themselves? Because I was not sure if they just pick up packages from some other deployed cells. Because, for example, I saw the footage with that woman in Odessa, and she was saying something like, I was supposed to bring this package here, or something like, she's like there is a package, I was supposed to bring this package here when the policeman was approaching her, and that's where the explosion happened. So is it confirmed that they are assembling it themselves, or is it just a deception that they're trying to confuse?
It's not confirmed because I don't have access to the details of those specific cases, but that's what I know. So basically, they acquire the explosive, the bomb, somehow. And generally speaking, like bomb is not that hard to make using a phone chemical fertilizer, things that you have at home. So they can either make them themselves, or they can acquire them from a different terrorist cell that already operates there and just leaves the package whatever they need to.
I believe when I read the story,
Oh,
it's
I got you next, Greg.
it was like
Go ahead, Will.
it had to do with them dropping it off. Like the Russians dropped off the bomb somewhere, which she would pick it up. They basically tell, pick up this bag, move it there. Sometimes won't even tell them what it is. They'll just say like, all your problems will go away. All you need to do is move a bag around. What's the big deal there, right? And then all your problems are gone. And then it's only after the explosion happens that you realize exactly what you've done, and now you're a terrorist. And let me be clear, it's not just within Ukraine. It's also, there's been instances of this outside of Ukraine where the Russians have tried to get refugees going into Poland to blow up the rail lines between Poland and Ukraine to mess up the logistics, trying to turn refugees already in a desperate situation that they've displaced into terrorists. They've also done bombings all across Europe. There's been at least a few in Canada. I believe there's been a few accused in the United States. So, I mean, it's a question of whether in all these instances they're hiring other people or it's being done by the Russians themselves. But in a lot of them, or at least a lot of the ones that get caught, it's they're getting patsies.
Greg?
Well, I can answer your question there, Georgie, a little bit. I was at a dinner right before coming back from Ukraine this time with a general, and Starsky, if I gave you his name, I'll give it to you off stream. I mean, you believe me, you know this guy. And so we're sitting there having dinner, and it was the same night that this was early on happening. There were bombings going off in Pavlograd, and some of the first ones were in Rivne. And we were sitting there having dinner, and I was there for 4 hours, and I'm sitting there kind of starstruck, who I'm having dinner with, and we're just talking about the war and making a friendship, and we donated some stuff for his units, just, as a, friendship and all of this, and we've got a good relationship going on. And I was checking something on my phone, and I said, "Hey, man, what is your opinion on these bombings going on?" And he looked at me, and this is God's honest truth. He looked at me, he says, "Really? You want to know?" I said, "Yeah, I want to know." He picked up his phone. He had the police reports, the photos of the bomber, and all the details of the bombing. He says, "Listen, share it to the world, no problem. These are people that are in Ukraine looking for money. They're being groomed through social media. Russian operatives are in the country with the pre-made packages. They arrange the meetings. They arrange the money. It's a simple pass and drop at a certain time and location." So I think an overwhelming majority of the time is just a pickup and a drop with a pre-calculated work of the FSB and others terrorizing. And Starsky, to your point, that there's no differentiation now between Russian operations around the world. And there was a chart put out just within the last week showing the potential locations of Russian terrorist activity through just in Europe, and it was overwhelming how many potential places where Russia is operating with terroristic activity and actions. So for sure, they're there. I mean, you guys know, Starsky, you're a veteran. Mercado, you've been there many times. Dylan, you've been there. You have to be careful even when you're getting around the frontline areas because it's just tough. There's a lot of operations going on, and you stick to yourselves and you stick to your guns and you stick with the people you trust because it's increasing right now. But confirmed, it was drop-offs of pre-made stuff, Georgie.
Absolutely. Starsky, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. We also we could see that early in the first days of the Russian invasion when there were also like sabotage groups that were hired from locals, and they would be paid something like $100, I think, $200. They would deliver all kinds of different crap, also bombs. I know because my brigade and our brigade that we were stationed with, we all worked against those sabotage groups early in the first days. And generally speaking, Russian FSB has all kinds of different approaches to people, from people that are legally hired as couriers to deliver packages, which they don't know what's inside, to people that are literally either blackmailed or directly hired and explained how to deliver this or that package to like different locations. Russians have this very, very big instrumentarium, I'm not sure how to translate it, of getting those people, hiring those, recruiting those people.
Greg?
Well, I'm just going to jump on this because it's almost like the stream so far has went to stories that are underreported, and like people are probably not aware of these things. So if you're there and you're running aid, and it was much different early in the war, now it's completely different level because it's so much more dangerous now. Exponentially more dangerous. Running aid, helping, extracting civilians, doing what Dylan does. You go into Kherson. It's unbelievably dangerous to be inside Kherson right now, and it's changing every day. But with that said, the security has tightened that with even known volunteer organizations like our vehicle completely registered, all of our numbers, like everything. We typically rolling on through block posts with a wave and a high five. But now it's like they go, hold on, guys. We just need to take a peek because we're having issues where Russians are even using volunteer organizations, humanitarian organizations like Camels, and they're packing stuff that's coming into the more frontline areas, and you guys don't even know it. So your truck been with you the whole time? Has it left your garage? Have you loaded everything? I mean, stuff like you're asked at the airport. So the security is changing a little bit, and it's not that volunteer organizations or those groups that are running aid to help are doing it on purpose. I mean, Russia is going all out with the terroristic activity. So they're even using these vehicles like Camels up underneath, taping crap to stuff just to get stuff there. So just a little addendum on that reality.
Absolutely. And just to remind everybody, we are raising funds for a truck that will go directly to Ukrainian defenders. It will help save lives. Link is in the chat and the description, just to pull it up really quick, if I so could, to the panel. There it is. Thank you to everybody. 8,583 euro out of 11,000. Thank you to everybody for doing that. Okay, this is going towards a larger fundraiser of 220,000 euro. We got Georgie on that, but his channel is so good at this, and they completed theirs already. So I think now Georgie's I'll talk about it at the end, but they're about to start a patch campaign. But Ukraine Matters is on this fundraiser, and thank you again to everybody for contributing to that. All right, now let's jump to current events and recent developments. All right, so I'm going to read the context of what we're going to be talking about. I want your guys' general take on it, and then I have specific questions for each of you to dive into further. So Putin proposed putting Ukraine under UN-led governance with foreign supervised elections. Most see it as a manipulation tactic. Okay, so general take, and then also specific responses. Starsky, what would this do to military morale and national sovereignty?
So first of all, it's a violation of law, and all Ukrainian soldiers understand this clearly. There is no such a question, I would say, in the armed forces of Ukraine or National Guard or among the policemen that we need elections. No, we need to win the war. We need Russians to be removed from our territories, and then we can have elections. That will be the first thing that we will do. Everything is extremely clear, guys. First of all, foreign military aid to Ukraine hurts Putin. That is one of the main reasons why he cannot advance as fast as he likes. That is the main reason why he loses his personnel and his vehicles, and why his oil refineries are on fire today. And he's been talking about stopping the military aid to Ukraine since early last year, literally like exactly 1 year ago, when Tucker Carlson went to Moscow and had that 3-hour-long lecture with Putin on who are pechenegi, you know. So back then already Putin expressed two main points about the stopping the military aid to Ukraine, because this is something that bothers him. That is why he talks about it. And of course, another thing is that current government and current system of management and military management that we have in Ukraine also hurts Putin. And he understands that, and he talks about it because this is something that bothers him. So therefore, he wants to remove current government, current president. He wants to do that in violation of Constitution of Ukraine. Unfortunately, stupid, clueless, brain-dead invoice that negotiate with Russians, they completely accept this idea. They completely they have complete understanding with Russians, even though it's a clear violation of Ukrainian constitution. And Russians were basically spreading those narratives that Zelensky is a dictator last year. That is that is a narrative that literally emerged last year. He canceled elections. So another thing that I wanted to say but forgot because I'm old, regarding elections, I will tell you when I remember, okay?
That's fine. All good. Dylan, what are people on the ground saying about this? Or what are the soldiers saying? What are you hearing?
I mean, I haven't talked to too many soldiers about it, honestly, because I don't want to bother them with this bullshit. Like, I want to ask them about questions about their unit and what they need and what they're dealing with. I don't want to be like, what do you think of Putin's UN peace proposal that Zelensky would reject immediately? I mean, the general consensus is that it's a delaying tactic, that this is a way to try to derail negotiations. This is a way to try to replace a government, not because, you know, the Russians care about Ukraine's democratic principles and they've invaded because actually all their soldiers are poll watchers and they need to make sure everything's up to code. No, they don't care about that. And neither does Trump. You think the guy who said, oh, I lost an election, suspend the Constitution, all of a sudden has become a principled Republican, as in he believes in Republican values, as in the Republic. And I don't really believe that's inspired him to some degree that he's intervened, even though Trump said it was his idea. I don't think it is. So there has to be some other purpose here. And I think it's either delaying or replacing the government with something that would be more willing to negotiate terms that is more acceptable to the Russians, or more willing to budge and concede more, because the Russians have restated their position so many times, this old Molotov negotiating tactic, that the American government, at least currently, thinks, oh, well, the Russians could never move off of these new demands. They could never move off these demands. They've been saying them forever. That's how you have Steve Witkoff on Tucker Carlson's podcast talking about how occupied territory, most of them actually want to be part of Russia. Most of these Russian speakers, they speak Russian anyway. And it starts sounding like it's Russia 1, not like it's they
did a referendum. Don't forget.
And most of them voted to stay, as if it was like a legitimate vote. And later he tried to backpedal and say, well, that's how the Russians view it. Still not properly informing the American public about what's going on.
He was talking about 4 regions. Stupid freak doesn't know.
He doesn't even know.
He said Crimea, and then he gave up.
No, he said
Crimea and Donbass.
Crimea
Yeah.
Donbass.
Crimea and Donbass.
Donbass.
He did say that. But these are the people that are negotiating it. Donald Trump finding just out about Iranian drones and stuff. So I think for the Russians, no matter how this goes, there's a victory involved, right? If this delays negotiations, then, you know, this talk about an offensive in the Sumy or offensive in the Kharkiv or a new offensive in the spring to add more pressure and try to, you know, get Kherson and Zaporizhia, which they have yet to announce that they're withdrawing from that as an interest of theirs. I think part of the reason they do the Cuban safari is because they still have intentions to conquer these cities. So it's either a delaying tactic or a hope that they'll be able to replace the government. So here's a question. What happens? Zelensky has 69% approval rating. When Zelensky does, like, let's say they do this whole charade. Let's say they go out and they spend the money on having everybody in Ukraine vote. They do it in bunkers. They make sure they're not lining up in polling locations above ground because of the risk of them being struck or a bombing, and they actually have to entertain this. They got to go to foreign Ukrainians that are overseas, you know, set up polling places in Germany, set up polling places in Poland, set up polling places in all these places, and then have to swallow the fact that people in occupied territory are just not going to be able to have a say on the future of their country. And then they do this, and then Zelensky wins. Then what? Do you think, oh, then the Russians are going to say, well, now I recognize it as the legitimate government of Ukraine. Now I respect that they're actually representing the views and wishes of the Ukrainian people. No, then it just serves the purpose of delay, right? No matter how it ends, if it ends with them willing to concede more, well, then the Russians get what they want. If it ends with more delay, well, then the Russians got what they want. The Ukrainians are weaker. There was no aid sent in that time period. To me, there's no value here dedicated to republicanism or democratic values or wanting to have an election. It's about wanting to have a different person at the top of the Ukrainian government who's more conciliatory or delaying. I just can't see it as anything else.
Georgie and Greg, we'll get to you, but Starsky has a response to Dylan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that looking at this logically, we understand that there will be no elections. Literally, even out of security measures, you cannot gather people in one place massively to vote. Like everybody understands in Ukraine that it's impossible. Russians also understand that it's impossible because Ukrainians will not be violating constitution. Why is it done, right? What's the main purpose? The main purpose is to damage Ukraine's image internationally. The main idea is to show that, yes, this is a country that is being run by a dictator, that dictator wants to keep his power, he's a warmonger and things like that. That is the main thing. And why do we see that? It's literally because Ukraine has advantage in terms of its international image. We already showed that we won't negotiate peace. We offered the 30-day ceasefire that Russia keeps violating since the very first day they agreed to, and they want to damage Ukraine's image. We already saw this black PR against Ukraine already running with those emotional images of Ukrainian protesters spitting in the baby trolley of J.D. Vance, spitting, with Ukrainian president disrespecting Donald Trump in his office because he doesn't wear a suit. We will see a lot of those absolutely low-level attempts to destroy Ukraine's image from the Trump's administration, because it's full of people who literally hate Ukraine. We all see that. And we will also see things like this because, again, Putin said that Ukraine is being run by Nazi organizations. Again, he starts using this absolutely stupid narrative. And we will see such attempts. They will keep trying to destroy Ukraine's image. That is literally what I see logically.
Absolutely. Just to catch the chat up to what we're talking about, Putin proposed putting Ukraine under UN-led governance with foreign supervised elections. Most see it as a manipulation tactic. We're getting the takes from the panel. Georgie, what's Russia trying to gain here?
Nothing. It's just a propaganda tactic to create white noise. So you spend time talking about it instead of the things that actually matter. You're welcome.
Thanks, Georgie. Greg, why now? What's behind Putin's timing?
Same thing he always does: division, disruption, and delay. That's the modus operandi. And then to normalize that behavior, throw something big at the wall, so we can maybe get something to stick. The bottom line is the UN Guterres did have to come out and say, hey, that's not happening. But what I really like is how Ukraine responded, and it was from the foreign ministry, Tuki. He says, Ukrainian foreign ministry proposes establishing UN interim administration in Russia. In response to Putin's offer to do so in Ukraine, it seems that local residents would benefit greatly from any government other than Putin, who is spending billions of dollars on his criminal war against Ukraine. And that was right from the foreign ministry spokesperson. So that's how you respond to it. We're getting to the place where Ukraine is pushing the envelope in certain statements they're making. Even Zelensky calling Putin and the Russian war machine, they're dinosaurs wanting to consume Ukraine. They're making the word pictures stronger on purpose to combat that narrative. And then additionally, Russia wants to destabilize Ukraine from inside. So if you're very up on Ukrainian politics, which most in here probably aren't on the political level understanding. Like there's internal struggles, not in regard to like Zelensky has that 69% approval rating. He does. And what really rallied the world and what really rallied more importantly, Ukrainians, like with an inoculation of adrenaline to get behind Zelensky more, was the debacle in the White House when he was attacked by J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. It rallied Ukrainians. But what we see, if you're reading Ukrainian, you're there, you're watching it, we see like little internal battles between like Goncharenko and Sternyenko, and they go public with this nasty display of, I mean, guys, it's bad, okay? And what Russia does is they try to continue to destabilize from inside and outside. But it's, as Georgie said, it's white noise that covers up the big message, but there are little tasks in there they're trying to accomplish. They want to normalize this, you understand? It goes back to how the KGB was trained. They want to go crazy, then normalize it. Go crazy, then normalize it. And we're seeing some of that. And that's what we're here trying to educate and stand and fight against.
Absolutely, Greg. Next top story we got is the U.S. Ukraine mineral deal. The U.S. proposes investment in exchange for control of Ukraine's mineral profits to repay aid, with no security guarantees included, from what I've seen. Georgie, does this risk long-term economic independence, and what's your take on the situation?
No, I think Ukraine should definitely not sign that deal. It's not a deal. It's I don't even know how to put it into words. It's like, this is the level of like an agreement, a contract that you would impose on a party that invaded your country, and then you were strong enough to win over them, and then like as a part of the reparation package, you maybe impose like half of what was proposed in that deal. That is the level, and we're talking about double that. It disregards any kind of legitimacy for Ukraine now. So people have tried, like, and bless their hearts, you know, like the people that try to tell me, Georgie, this is just the maximalist position for Trump, you know, like he's trying to find some place in between.
40 chess.
Well, in my perspective, he can find some place in between his ass cheeks to put this deal in. That's kind of where I see this deal should be going. Now, obviously, Ukraine should be very diplomatic, but and potentially come out of the counter proposal. I would think that I would employ my best diplomats to impose the best delaying tactic you could. Now, Zelensky already came out and said that something like what he said, that we are not considering the debt as a help that the U.S. has sent to us as a debt to Ukraine. I think it's a nice message, but I would not even give that. I would just like do like a lot of these delaying tactics and so on, because the only thing that Ukraine needs right now from US, and this is important, this is something I want to underscore, because this is something that defines framework. When we're talking about Trump's administration has done jack shit to help Ukraine. Like they didn't. The only thing that they did, and it was the best, they did nothing. Because all the help that is coming to Ukraine technically is the help that was allocated by the Biden administration and all of the contracts that was signed during the Biden administration. So the best thing that Trump has to offer for Ukraine is nothing. There was no positive words. There was no discussion. There was actually discussion in the presence of, like, in the person of Mike Johnson, talking about that there is not going to be any new Ukraine support packages proposed in Congress. That's about it. That's the only message that came in with regards to future support for Ukraine. Everything else that Trump's administration did beyond that is just like what we're going to give to Russia, like what kind of concessions. They've gave up all of the NATO already. They gave up all of the other things even before negotiations started. And Putin kind of just was very happy about it, because it started for him as maybe I should be careful about this. What if U.S. is going to start considering some kind of sanctions against me? But as he kind of started testing, like Putin loves to test. He loves like throwing in those like little insults, to kind of poke around and underpin. Like, so he tried to like, okay, well, you proposed us like this general peace deal. Well, what about you kind of proposed the deal, but it's going to be like on a ceasefire with the air or just a ground ceasefire. And then we kind of agree on the energy system. But we also like bombed it the same day, the energy system of Ukraine. But
Same day.
But we shut down our own drones that were flying to Ukraine. They didn't, by the way, they didn't shut down their own drones.
They didn't?
They didn't. Yeah, imagine that. But Trump's administration bought it and it was regurgitating. So Putin understood that he can do anything. And in his latest statement, his latest presentation, he basically dropped any kind of facade that there needs to be some kind of a caretaking activities done with Trump's administration, because a lot of these gestures that he did for Trump, like I shut down my own drones, they were not very nicely received within the Russian pro-war camp. Like they didn't receive that great. Like, why is Putin doing this? Why he wants to give up? For what reason did our fighters die then? And that is the narrative within the Russian camp. So now Putin is openly disrespecting Trump, and he understands that Trump is just going to eat it all, that all of the pressure will go on Ukraine. And this deal, I don't even know if I can call it a deal. It's not even extortion. It's just humiliation package. It's like asking you, like, hey, here is a pile of turd. Would you like some sauce with it?
Exactly. Couldn't say it better. Dylan, do you view this as necessary or a sellout? And also your general take.
Man, I don't see it as necessary. The idea that it's necessary is silly. It's quite literally not necessary. If it was necessary, then we would have already done it. It's not like we couldn't trade with Ukraine for their resources regularly. It's not like we could, assist them and then trade for it like a normal country. But I mean, Trump and other countries have really gotten this idea in their head that Trump likes this idea of a mineral deal. The Democratic Republic of Congo, which is dealing with the M23 rebel crisis in its east, is actually offering Trump a type of mineral deal right now, basically offering its cobalt and its other raw minerals and different resources in return for him helping them with their military assistance. And you want to know what Trump said? Maybe we'll think about it. We'll think about sending you military assistance and helping you deal with these M23 rebels in return for your minerals. So it's not like Donald Trump has also not been able, or his administration has not entertained the idea of, okay, military support for resource deals. But what this is saying is, we already gave you what you needed. We don't need to give you anything else. Pay us for the stuff that we gave you, which we lie about all the time, saying it's $350 billion.
And you're not grateful. You're not grateful.
You're not grateful, even though you thank us all the time. And
day.
so you need to pay us back for this aid that we never said you would have to pay for, and was clearly within our own interests. It was clearly within our interest to support you, within our alliance structure, within our national security. It was a keeping of our commitment. But we're adding this price tag after the fact, and the price tag is going to be inflated in comparison to the actual price of aid. Plus, in this new deal, there's also interest applied, so interest will be added as well. And in this
4%.
new deal, this deal, you're talking about complete access to any government files and documents within inside the Ukrainian government, which also laps over into private institutions as well. You're talking about the majority of the board for this private institution, this private fund, whatever you want to call it, this resource fund, this reinvestment fund. The majority of the people on the board, 3 out of the 5, they said has to be American, which would mean that the United States would have veto power over all Ukrainian mineral investment issues. That it would be the United States who gets first and last say when it comes to how Ukraine manages its resources, manages mining activities, manages where that gets sent afterwards, and when that wealth is sent overseas, the United States gets first claim, meaning America gets its cut before the Ukrainian gets its cut. The United States gets a cut of Ukrainian resources before the Ukrainian people do. So when you talk about the access to government files, the United States having veto power on the majority of the war, for the majority of the board, when you talk about them getting the cut, the interest rate, the inflated numbers that they throw out all the time, the constant lies about it, and the fact that this is supposed to, according to Trump's negotiators and his team, this is supposed to work as a functional deterrent. That instead of dedicating actual troops to be on the ground or including Ukraine in Article 5 protections, what we've decided to do instead is to indicate to the Russians how economically interested we are in Ukraine, and that economic interest is supposed to dissuade them from invading. As we all know, that's enough to dissuade the Chinese from threatening Taiwan. As we know that it's been enough to threaten any number of superpowers from not invading. It's stupid. Kuwait, I mean, like, how many historical examples do we have to point to? If you are saying to the public, I'm not willing to put more aid into this, I'm not willing to put my troops on the ground, I'm not willing to put my neck out for you, how are the Russians going to believe that for mining rights, you're going to put U.S. boots on the ground to die in Ukraine? It's just and not even like boots on the ground. If you're saying that it's not affordable and you can't do it and you're willing to concede so much, what about just aid? What about just continuing to send javelins, continuing to send intelligence, continuing to maintain the systems? So I don't see this as necessary. And in fact, I would go further to say that there's probably better ways for Ukraine to leverage its minerals. If Ukraine is really set on the idea of selling off its minerals, even though it was really an idea adapted in crisis because they knew Trump was a deal guy. But if they really wanted to, it might be useful to throw that at somebody who's actually willing to pay them for it. I mean, if somebody was willing to send them $1 billion for all of their mineral rights, that would be getting more financial value out of it than what the United States would be offering when it comes to weapon shipments and when it needs to defend itself right now. So I don't know why the United States couldn't A, make a better deal, or B, continue to support them anyway, like we said we were originally.
Exactly. Before we get to Greg and Starsky, Georgie has a response to Dylan. I'm muted, buddy. Muted.
Not a response, just a follow-up that what we should have started with is like, what does deal entail actually? And Dylan already did a great job talking about some of the points, and I just want to introduce to everyone that's going to be listening to this, maybe you haven't been introduced to the text. So the deal entails that there's going to be a fund that's going to be managing the Ukrainian resources, but we're not talking about rare earth minerals anymore. We're talking about pretty much anything that comes out of the ground in one way or another. Oil, gas, resources, different ores. I'm not sure if forests are there. There was like over 50 names of different types of valuable resources of Ukraine. US will fully manage existing and the future deals. They have, not US, but like that fund will manage future and existing deals. They also will manage and have a kind of overview and oversight of both private and public deals. So even if there is like a private company doing something, they are also part of this fund somehow. To this fund, there will be 5 persons running it, of which there's going to be 3 appointed by the US administration and having the exclusive veto right on the whole thing. All the profits of this fund will instantly leave Ukraine and be converted to US dollars. And then as converted by US dollars, then US is going to take their share. And only after that, if there is something left, then it's going to be spread in between the stakeholders. This, funds, there's going to be, the US is going to say that its contribution to this fund is actually what US has already sent to Ukraine instead of weapons, instead of contributing anything else. So all the setup, all of the payments, paying for any kind of activities, businesses that potentially US companies will do is mostly going to be covered by Ukraine themselves. There is no expiration date of the agreement. US will have the first right say on any kind of deals and agreements that are going to be made with Ukraine and US companies, if there will be done. And more importantly, they also have a full veto power with any contracts with a third party. So essentially anything that Ukraine wants to do with their resources outside of US deals, US can say, no, you're not doing this. There is no security guarantees included in this, obviously, as Dylan said. But more importantly, and I think Dylan also mentioned this, is that US will have full access at any moment to any files or any kind of work related to these resources. Any company, anything, they can get full access to any kind of business documentation or company activity that is dealing with any part of Ukrainian resources. And I'm pretty sure they're going to put in the electrical plants there at some point as well. It's insanity.
Absolutely. Just to catch up the chat, this is the U.S. proposal for investment in exchange for control of Ukraine's mineral profits and everything that Georgie and Dylan has laid out for us so eloquently, with no security guarantees attached from what I've seen. Greg, is this normal in global? Oh, go ahead.
I think Dylan and Georgie covered it very, very well and completely agree with both of their perspectives. The only things that I would add to it is, the United States negotiating not fairly, because Zelensky today stating that, every time we have something we're looking at agreeing on, the revision comes back to us and it's completely changed. But then he stated it's a typical behavior because right now in the negotiations between the United States and Ukraine and Russia, it's typical 3 sets of documents are running for everything anyway. So this is normal behavior. And of course, we would never agree for taking on any kind of debt in this mineral agreement. So that is golden. Secondly, of course, no security guarantees, and Georgie and Dylan laid out perfectly. The security guarantees would be American enterprises there on the ground. They think if American workers are there, if European workers are there, well, I know Dylan has done this, I've done it, Starsky's done it. I've walked on the rubble of American companies, so that's not going to work. Satellite offices out in the Donetsk region that are owned by America that are level to the ground, my feet have been on. So that's not going to work. And then thirdly, when it comes to the sharing of files and internal information, I don't see what the problem is there, because that's basically the modus operandi of American intelligence right now by our cabinet. We just share everything anyway. So that's no big deal. We're setting the example that everything's public. So
exactly. Georgie has a
sorry, I
response.
couldn't help on that one.
You're not wrong.
Not from me, actually, from chat, from Susanna. Sorry, we're butchering the name, but she said that most likely this deal is probably also going to violate the accession for Ukraine to EU, because EU is an open market. So if there is someone that is controlling some parts of that open market, that is probably a big no-no.
Absolutely. Operator Starsky, would this limit Ukraine's ability to self-fund defense, or how would this harm Ukraine internally?
Well, first of all, again, from what I see is this whole deal is literally about return of investment in best case scenario for Trump administration. In worst case scenario, it again benefits Trump administration, because it's again something that can show that Ukrainians are ungrateful warmongers who literally receive like billions and hundreds of billions of aid from the United States and don't want to return it. So one way or another, this is something like, like elections in Ukraine, something that cannot be done, but if it's done, it will not benefit Ukraine and won't help situation whatsoever.
Absolutely. Thank you, Starsky, for that take there. Just to remind you guys, we are fundraising for our Easter fundraiser. I'll put up on the stream in a minute, but you guys can find the link in the description. The next topic is European Reassurance Force proposal. France and the United Kingdom want a European military presence in Ukraine to deter Russia. No EU consensus yet from what I can see. I think it was called Coalition of the Willing, or you guys can give an update on that. Let's start with Dylan. How do troops and citizens feel about this? What's your general take about the situation as a whole?
I mean, I don't know anybody in Ukraine who, after dealing with 3 years of the Russian army bearing down them, wouldn't like the Swedes or the Germans or the Brits or the French to do it for a change. Feel what it's like to have those FPVs buzz over your head, not knowing if it's your FPV or if it's their FPV, because the drone detector just beeps. It doesn't tell you whose side it's on. You'd sit there and have to deal with the yeah, of course they'd appreciate it, but it's not going to happen during the war. I don't think, unless there's a major change, that the odds of that happening are very low, unless there was some sort of a high-profile incident that really changed the dynamic. And so what we're talking about is people coming in, being deployed in Ukraine post-war in order to hold it and make sure it doesn't happen again. And in my mind, if the United States is going to be a veto vote on NATO membership. And we're not even talking about Hungary. We're not even talking about the other nation states that would step in the way. The only other proposal I've seen thrown out there by a European leader as to what we could do to get around it was extending Article 5 protections to Ukraine while excluding them from NATO. But then what's the fucking point? That's what NATO is. I mean, oh no, Ukraine won't be able to participate in NATO's counterterrorism operations. The Russians will certainly accept those terms. So I just think it's a lot of people kind of hoping and praying when it comes to NATO. So yeah, I think that it makes sense that having troops on the ground physically deterring, what the message it sends isn't as simple as like, oh, look, these are the amount of troops we're going to have supporting Ukraine. You don't need 50 to 100,000, 150,000 British soldiers in there to stop the Russian army and possibly cross over. You need a certain amount of response force, but you need basically a commitment. And by having soldiers on the ground in Ukraine, what you're saying is these soldiers can get fired upon, these soldiers get attacked, and if they do, we can't back out. You can't take that type of fire out in the field and then say, oh, never mind, I'm pulling out, let's retreat, let's run away. So by putting those physical investments, by putting your money where your mouth is, and by putting those soldiers on the ground, you let the Ukrainians know you're serious, but more importantly, you let the Russians know you're serious. So I do think there is a use for this, but they have to be serious about it. It can't be 100 to 200 soldiers. The United States could have gotten away with that because the United States, all they need to do is just basically say, look, we're politically committed. They could put one Marine on the border and that would fulfill this purpose. The Europeans need to actually place a deterrence force that could resist the Russians for a little bit. So we're talking about, 5-digit armies, 10 to 20,000 soldiers. When we're talking about the French, we're talking about British. If we wanted a strong deterrence force, getting that might be a little bit more difficult. Getting a European force like like Zelensky has asked for, of 100,000, 150,000 altogether, while I think that would add a lot, Ukraine would still have to carry the majority of the weight, so I still think Europe is getting off relatively okay, considering they're still going to have the majority of the deployments. They're going to be one that still is having the war fought on their territory mostly. So I think it's the right frame of thinking, but I don't believe it should be exchanged for an abandonment of NATO membership or basically a commitment to like, okay, now we can just forget about the United States interests here. But that you can't bet on the United States for the next 2 to 4 years. You have to be able to plan with the United States as no backstop whatsoever. In fact, even possibly as a foil. That doesn't mean you aim for that goal, but you need to be ready for that externality.
Absolutely. Georgie, symbolic or practical benefit? And then your general take too.
To what? Sorry.
To the European military presence in Ukraine deterring Russia. Is this symbolic? Is there something practical? Just your take on it. Comes after the meeting.
There is no presence. There is no presence. so
Right.
there is a bit too early to say. I can tell this. I'm a big critique because I know that Europe can do more, and I'm very passionate. I'm a very pro-European guy. So. And like Ukraine matters, is actually not about Ukraine. It's about the fact that for us Ukraine matters. That right now Ukraine is what matters the most for us as Europeans and actually in the world. That's kind of the message of actually my channel name. And this is where we are. What I would say is I am very happy to see that we. See the dynamic of people discussing the presence of European troops in Ukraine as more and more realistic. We moved from fantasy discussions about that there's going to be some kind of a peacekeeping force from various countries that's once the war is over, they're going to control the border and so on. We moved from that. We already moved some time from that. Now the message is, okay, we're going to have a presence of certain specialists, plus the air presence, plus intelligence presence. Additionally, we might have control of some areas to allow Ukrainian armed forces to then be in defense of the front line, because Ukrainian army is the best army in Europe, period. So I'm really happy that we saw that realistic dynamic shift. Unfortunately, at that moment when that happened, there was still a lot of fantasy. Most notably that there was a discussion that's going to be about 30,000 forces strong, and they're going to have U.S. backing, to which U.S. later said, nope, no, you don't. Then they tried to do UN backing and said like, well, maybe UN is going to issue a mandate for us to be in Ukraine. And then UN said like, no, we won't. So now they said like, well, okay, so now we're probably not going to send the troops right away. And then we had just the latest summit, and it was a lot more, again, realistic. A lot more in a sense of Ukraine is they're gonna be to defend, and it's our point to work closely with Ukrainians and supplement them with the capabilities that we have, because we do not have presence on the ground. We do not have the forces that can fight the Russians. We do not have the ability to really stop them, but we can try to help Ukrainians with as much as we can. Additional trainers, additional surveillance officers, additional infrastructure, logistics components, and so on. Anything that we can provide with these couple thousand of forces that can help Ukraine do in case of potential Russian invasion. So all of that is good. I'm really happy with the dynamic, and I'm really happy the discussion right now is realistic. My only problem is the Sky Shield, it was called. I remembered how it was like the protection. My only problem with all of that discussion and general discussion about security for Ukraine is, why are we preparing for the next time Putin invades? Like that's kind of the crux of the matter for me. What is stopping the Sky Shield, for example, to be enacted now? Nothing. Like because the only answer to that you would hear is Putin is going to nuke us. Well, I'm sorry to say, I've heard that answer before, and it's not impressive anymore. We've heard it many, many times. That's the only thing. Like if you already kind of diluted this, we're going to come in as a great big white horse riding knights and peacekeepers that's going to protect both Ukraine and Russia from meeting again and during the war. Well, if you already agreed that, no, okay, we're going to let Ukraine join the EU, and Ukraine is in large sense is already, and this is the change of rhetoric, is being treated as a member of a European Union in some of the latest documents, and the military as well. Well, what are you waiting for then? That is kind of the crux of it, and this is the last step that I feel we're not there yet. So until there is this realization that we do not need to prepare for the next war, that it's easier for us to do something now and win very much this one, protect maybe not the whole Ukraine, but at least the western part of Ukraine with the Sky Shield, protect the facilities, protect the border, maybe station the troops on the border with Moldova. Until then, it's mostly just symbolic discussions.
Absolutely. Just to catch the chat and viewers up, we're talking about the European Reassurance Force proposal. France and the United Kingdom want a European military presence in Ukraine to deter Russia, but there's no consensus in the EU yet at this time. Greg Terry, what message does this? Well, what message?
Go ahead.
This send?
Ask the question.
Of course.
Yeah, no problem.
What message does this send to Russia or NATO, and also your general take?
Okay, so general take is, it was just going to be 2 points, because really great panel here, because these guys know what they're talking about. So I'm honored to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Andrew. But I like to listen to Zelensky. He's the president of Ukraine. So just a couple of hours ago, he made the statements where within the next week going to be some very high-level meetings coming to Kyiv about European delegation to take it to the next level. And he stated that there'll be other nations there, but for sure, I can tell you that Great Britain and France will be there. Additionally, in another statement he made tonight, he stated that we are expanding, making new contracts for electronic intelligence, military depots, defense licenses, shelling license, drone manufacturing. So we see like not just the military side. So I completely concur with Georgie, and I know the rest of us agree as well. Putin needs to be defeated now. This evil plague needs to be defeated, and it benefits the entire world. The problem is when the president of the United States considers Vladimir Putin his friend, and Xi Jinping his friend, and Kim Jong-un his friend, and I'm not making that up, I'm quoting, then we have a complete miscalculation and misunderstanding of that evil machine that is sitting there in the Kremlin. So it's not about creating something for a future war or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. As Georgie discussed very early on in this stream, Russia has been depleted in many regards and many resources. Yes, stuff's pumping in from North Korea, but not to the level that they're putting out. North Korea sending in some troops additionally, but not to the level. It's not 50 or 100,000 yet. If China kicks in, then we have a major problem. We need to stop it before that could even be considered or happen. But until the world, and right now it looks like EU, UK, and other nations. And I don't want to throw out, Australia loves and supports Ukraine. Nations in the Far East, Japan, for example, support Ukraine. But the reality is this coalition of the willing, the EU, until we make the decision, and I say we as the EU, I'm an American, and America makes the decision that now is the time to defeat Vladimir Putin and this evil, I think we just have the same thing happening day after day after day. It's a new story. It just has a different picture on it. So I'm hoping for more. I really am. I'm hoping for more. But the reality is this needs to be defeated, not only militarily, but intrinsically. This evil in the Kremlin needs to crumble from within.
Absolutely, Greg. Operator Starsky, how would this impact coordination on the ground and also your general take?
My thought is that considering the fact that we are fighting the war of attrition, where any pause is something that benefits Russia, and we understand that ceasefire is not part of Putin's strategy. Putin doesn't want ceasefire. Putin doesn't want negotiations with Ukraine. Putin wants literally Ukraine, right? And he will not be rebuilding his whole strategy that is like long-range strategy. It takes years and years to reach all his goals that he's working on. But we're currently fighting the war of attrition, where any sort of pause will benefit Russians because they're running out of their military stockpile. And there is a slight possibility that this pause is possible. Again, because the Trump administration is working on it without reaching any sort of strategic goals. They literally want ceasefire as soon as possible at all costs. We just need to stop shooting. That is what they say, which completely correlates with the idea that if such pause is reached, then Russia will be able to rebuild their forces and increase their stockpile. So, in my opinion, such idea of a peacekeeping force that is literally sitting there on the border, because if you listen to, for example, President Macron, Mr. Starmer, then basically it's like if there's a ceasefire in Ukraine, they will be there tomorrow. They will be deployed to Kyiv, Odessa, Lviv, key cities. So having such a threat, a deterrence from European countries means that Russia will do whatever it takes in order not to have a ceasefire. It's kind of questionable, of course, like if there are peacekeepers, for example, in Kyiv, and Russia strikes them and kills a bunch of men. How will the European countries react on that? And will they react on that? Considering that they are afraid of nuclear apocalypse, that will not happen because Russians don't want to kill their own children studying and living in European countries, right? But if we ignore this fact and literally think about the situation in terms of the war of attrition, then Putin will do whatever it takes in order not to acquire this pause, because this will work as a deterrence against Putin. At the same time, we also know that if Russia continues pushing with everything they have, instead of improving their rear, they will lose this war. So that is my view on this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Starsky. We're going to go to the final topic before we then go to closing statements afterwards, but this is going to be an open, organic discussion. What does peace look like now? Whoever wants to talk. Let's talk about realistic paths forward. What strategies should Ukraine prioritize? what should be avoided, and also your general take on what does peace, or that's what people will refer to it as, but I would personally refer to it as protection of Ukraine, defense of Ukraine. What does that look like for Ania? Whoever wants to go, open-ended.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Okay.
In my perspective, the costs for Ukraine are immense. The suffering and so on is just enormous. And there is right now only two peace options on the table, right? We talked about potential negotiated solutions and so on, and I think we got basically as best as we could, like not as best, like, okay, let me put it this way. We got the person that was ready to give Putin the most leeway possible, like the best off-ramp. Like he would even polish his shoes and do other things that I cannot say on your channel. I will repeat them on my channel just to make sure people get all the profanity level up to the speed. The point is, so we got that guy. And Putin saw that guy, talked with the guy, and then spit in his face and said, don't care, I'll go forward. So we basically have now like only two pathways. Either Ukraine just surrenders, lets Putin roll over. I'm not sure if it's going to be just the 4 regions. I don't expect it. Probably 4 regions, and there is some kind of a pro-Russian government in Ukraine, in Kyiv. That's one way. And I, with all perception and knowledge of Ukrainians, I just do not feel that it is a reasonable path forward. Andrew can correct me on this if he thinks there's a potential path forward, but I don't think there is anyone. And Ukraine is the ultimate agent in this, right? That's important to always care. It doesn't matter what Trump and Putin decides in their own little heads. They're 2 old fucking dudes that talk about something where they think they decide the fate of the universe. They don't. Ukraine does. So the second option, if there is no middle ground, is to continue fighting, right? So that's the way. And from there, then the only option is like how to continue fighting better. How to continue fighting better. And Ukraine is already doing a lot. Like it's investment in the weapons that are cost efficient. Their strategy that their Ministry of Defense introduced with the investment in technologies that have the beneficial, what is it called, cost, like kill per dollar ratio. I believe they did so, like drones and all of these like very, very robust technologies.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be motivating European states to invest more into Ukrainian defense, so we get more bang for buck of production. Ukraine still has capacity for production. And hopefully get the diplomacy going and maybe secure the part of Ukraine that is not touched by war. So to get those maybe forces to secure the, say, like, okay, the part of Ukraine that is going to be like Kyiv and to the west, that is off limits, no matter what. I believe that's the only way forward.
Absolutely.
Everything else, there is no anything else. There is only 2 options here.
Whoever else, Dylan, you have something?
Sure. I mean, if we talk about what we should do on the ground, I think veteran units need to be reinforced. I think what happened with the 155 was an absolute catastrophe. I interviewed a lot of those defectors. I talked to quite a few people who went through that. What really sucked about how that went wasn't necessarily that there wasn't people who wanted to make that thing work. It was that the people who did would get taken and then shift around to other units, and then they'd replace them with new guys, and then they'd get like 2 weeks or something of training, and then the constant moving around of people, of manpower to address the crisis, and just the chaos that went along with it, and bad leadership choices when it comes to 155. All of this could have been avoided. The manpower could have gotten to the front sooner, and all of the political scandal could have been avoided if a lot of the people on the ground who have been saying for a while that the veteran units should have just been reinforced. It gets these people to the front line quicker. They can learn from people with experience on the front. You're not going to have a bunch of people green, not able to learn from each other's experience on the front line, having to basically go through a trial by fire, which is what happened outside of Pokrovsk. It was a trial by fire that failed. So I think that you need to reinforce the veteran units. We need to make some boring investments. Excavators, okay? Excavators are boring. They're not very explosive. You know, it's not like we're driving those over the Russian lines. So I understand that they're not very flashy, but these are the things that units want all the time, and they need jamming equipment to protect them. Because a constant in this war has been a lack of prepared defenses. Sometimes you'll find people who really know what they're doing, who prepared the defenses well. That part of the front line will stand up strong, it'll do well, but then that'll be compromised by the position right next to them not being prepared well. And so you could do all the work in the world. You don't even get the excavators. You dig it yourself. You get that thing prepared, but then that position next to you falls. Now you're overwhelmed, you're flanked, and you have to pull back. And so these defenses need to be prepared long in advance. I'm not saying anything revolutionary here. This is stuff that Ukrainians have said for quite a while on their Telegram channels to commanders. I'm just kind of ringing the alarm bell for Westerners here. Also, the PPP advantage needs to be taken advantage of. It is much cheaper to produce military goods in Ukraine than it is in the rest of Europe. The regulations, while they have in some areas it's kind of overbearing, in comparison to some European capitals, actually much lower. The cost, much lower. You can get more bang for your buck. And if European capitals are thinking, well, what can we do with all of this money to get the most out of it, the most for a nation's defense? You have to invest it in countries that the dollar's going to go further in. You want to be able to produce 3 shells for the money you have, not 2 or 1. You want to be able to make it go as far as possible, and that means investing in countries like Ukraine, which, I mean, they're the ones fighting the war anyway, so it also helps in other purposes and keeping the economy afloat. Really, I think that when it comes to the diplomatic approach outside of the physical investments, honestly, peace through strength. If Trump was honest about that policy, honest about that statement, the idea of we're going to increase sanctions, we want to deal with this sooner rather than later, so we'll put 100 billion down, 80 billion, 120 billion down this year. Just get this done and over with. And maybe even the threat of doing that, if it was taken seriously, will be enough to make the Russians consider much more reasonable terms. Maybe it won't, but that's when you pull the trigger and swallow the crisis you're in. What I see is a bunch of people who don't want to accept that the Russians are not willing to accept reasonable terms. That in their minds, I remember I heard Tucker Carlson, when he was talking to Steve Witkoff, when he was talking about Steve Witkoff's answer of, oh, I don't think Russia wants to keep marching and take more of Ukraine. I don't think they want to march against Europe. Tucker's response to that was like, yeah, because I wouldn't. Would you? You're not Putin. You're not. Exactly. This is a very naive way of looking at it. These externalities need to be prepared for, and you need to be able to make it so that it's not really a choice. It's either you accept that, Ukraine is a free country, it's living on its own, and we can't really advance any further, or you basically fall on the sword. Those should be the options that are offered. That doesn't mean we need to nationally humiliate Russia and make it as difficult as possible and drag it out, but if they walk away with this thinking it was a successful operation, why wouldn't they do it again?
Exactly. So, guys, we're just talking at the end here. What does peace look like now? Let's talk about realistic paths forward.
Let me go third then, since I've got, I guess, some of the beautiful lady above me there. Beautiful hair I'm seeing, and I've got Long John Silver. I tried goofing off with this thing too, and I didn't know it was going to go live, and then I looked like an idiot. So sorry. But I will say this. So I think what Dylan was talking about, especially giving you guys more insight into like a 155 and to the 155th, and then explaining how difficult it is sometimes for coordination. Yes. And then PPP, drone, wherever you want to go. And then Georgie's like stating reality. Okay, this is what I think we're looking at. So now I'm going to take it from the other side, because the question was, how do we see a peace? So I will tell you how a majority of the Ukrainian soldiers that I work with and Ukrainian civilians I talk to and work with and are friends. I'm entering my 28th year of working in Ukraine. I know Ukraine pretty good. And this is the general consensus of what they want.
Mhm.
A, they're not quitting, number one. So take that off the table. B, they're not looking at this war the same way that other nations look at this war because they're Ukrainian. Those things are logical. Now, what would be great and the best? A, as Zelensky and anybody with sanity says, a just peace. Not a peace, not just peace, but a just peace. Secondly, I would add to that, because I'm gonna go with the rosy picture now. And I'm not a hopium guy at all, but this is what I would love for peace: sovereignty and territorial integrity. However that's going to look at the end, in reality, that territory must have sovereignty and integrity. Third, if there's no accountability for war crimes, I don't know how the world continues, because this is not, and I've tried to draw attention to this on my channel. There's wars and conflicts going on all over this world. We can talk about Myanmar, we can talk about Africa, but we can talk about Southeast Asia. But the reality is, Ukraine front and center on the stage. You're talking about as the guys were sharing earlier, the largest war since World War II, and this front line, which many of these guys here, if not all, have been along this front line. It's massive and it's unbelievable. You can't explain it. It can only be experienced. So there must be accountability for war crimes, reparations, long-term security, but most importantly, a just peace must reflect the voice of the Ukrainian people, not the voice of Donald Trump, not the voice of Vladimir Putin, not the voice of any other leader, not the voice of the United Nations, which is defunct, but it must reflect the voice of the Ukrainian people, and no frozen conflict. So that's where I leave it with my thoughts, a little bit on the more optimistic side.
Absolutely, Greg. You got to stay that way. You got to stay resilient.
But have to.
Right? You got to,
because we're presenting all different viewpoints. Because I concur with Dylan completely, and I concur with Georgie completely. But at the same time, I want to give you some perspective on what Ukrainians are thinking about. This is what they're looking for, and I've got a Ukrainian up there who looks like Arthur right now. But
Arthur can morph into whatever he wants.
There is a Ukrainian back there somewhere, and for some reason we've picked up a liberal Brit.
So speaking of a wild Johnny Pierce has appeared into the panel, and while he's joined at the end, we'll give him a take or two here before we're going to get to final closing statements. But JP, welcome to the panel. What's your top news story that you're focused on? And then we're talking about realistic paths forward. Oh, we don't hear you. You're muted, Johnny Pierce.
Unmute.
You got to unmute.
Every time I join this, every time. Yeah, I don't know. Where do I start? I've not.
Johnny, before you get started.
Yeah.
May the Lord touch your memory, sir. May the Lord touch your memory.
It didn't work. It just.
No, I'm getting an amen. One amen, Johnny. Come on, brother. I carried you through Head of Song. One amen.
I think
it had no.
I think I've got a slight itch up here. Oh, no, it's probably eczema. No, I think it's eczema. Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Greg, for the care.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. I'm producing so much content at the moment because the world has gone insane, and I've just done a whole video on Canada and Greenland and just the insanity that's involved there. And these things are all tangentially connected, or in fact, like incredibly connected to Ukraine. And I don't know where to start. I don't know what you guys have talked about. One thing I just did see, and I don't know if you've seen this, guys, but Trump in a presser, or when he's sitting down at his table and there are these reporters there. Someone said something about Iranian shaheeds. He says, yes, I've seen a report about this. Have you talked about this at all?
Greg brought it up, but go ahead.
No, you nail it, man.
You go ahead.
Yeah, just the idea that he's like, we're looking into this. We're looking into the fact, because, I mean, this is quite an interesting idea, because Iran is definitely the bad guys. Right? At the moment, like Russia, we're not quite sure if they're the bad guys, but Iran are definitely the bad guys as far as the US, the Trump administration is concerned. So if you can tie Russia to Iran, this is a conversation we had years ago when you started getting the Iranian Shaheeds, you got North Korea, and well, maybe these people are a bit funky about Russia. They're really going to see Russia as the bad guys because they're getting stuff from North Korea, they're getting stuff from Iran. It's like Trump is 1.5 years behind the curve here, and so as insane as this is, and just I keep talking about Trump's fundamental ignorance. He really actually doesn't know enough about anything that's important with regard to history, culture, geopolitics, military, all these things. He's got real veneer knowledge about stuff. I asked Jonathan Fink last night in a live. I said, Jonathan, give me one example of a 2, 5, 10-minute speech or conversation Trump has had in public ever that you have heard in the political realm where he has given you a detailed understanding of a subject, any subject, data, detailed, real in-depth understanding of any subject. He never has. You listen to every single word he's never spoken.
The beauty pageants. Yeah.
Maybe. Okay. I stand corrected, Dylan. I stand corrected. But seriously, everything is veneer. Everything is just vagueness. And I think here's another example of that he doesn't, probably almost certainly doesn't know that Iranian Shaheeds are being used in Ukraine and have been for a long time. In fact, so old school news now that they're not Iranian anymore. They're Russian. But I don't think he knows anything about this war. He's just thinking, oh, what can I do? Who can I do a deal with to make more money? And I don't know. So that's something that I think is quite interesting. Yeah.
And then what's your take on realistic paths going forward for peace within Ukraine? We've discussed all the major topics coming out, but just a lot of it's just BS in my opinion, and same with the channel or with the panel. What strategies should Ukraine prioritize, and what should be avoided?
Europe. I do wonder whether they're stringing the US along. I don't know. I really am sorry to be boring and say the same thing as I always do, but I don't know what the US has over Ukraine, such that they're beholden to the US. But it could be that they're not really beholden to the US. They are stringing them along until Europe is fully on board and able to at least provide enough assistance to Ukraine that closes the capability gap somewhat to what the US do. Now, it's interesting today that Zelensky's announced that they're no longer getting any free stuff from the US. Everything is now going to be paid for. And obviously the US have tried to retrospectively get money for that in the minerals deal, but it looks like that's not going to be signed. But the question is that intentionally made so horrific that they knew that Ukraine wouldn't sign it, and they're going to catch them in not signing it, and then use that as an excuse to jump ship or do whatever? Or do they have a lot of?
What do you mean it's going to be paid for? Because I haven't heard. Can you get some details in?
So one of the recent, in the last hour or so, Zelensky there's been some kind of, I forget how he phrased it, but I think it's with relation partly to the minerals deal, but also going forward that it was just a kind of formal announcement that we're not going to get any more free equipment from the US, as in, Presidential Drawdown Authority, USAI funded equipment, which is what's happened previously. So not only are they being charged retrospectively for the stuff they've given, but it's this formal announcement that, nothing's for free from the US anymore. That's how I understand it. I could be wrong.
Okay, so it's important to understand details here, because the production that is contracts, because PDA is almost out, there's barely a couple percent.
Well,
that doesn't matter.
3.8 billion.
But that doesn't matter. Well, I mean, the unallocated is different, but we're not counting that because I'm not expecting Trump to do anything.
Oh, right, yeah.
With regards to USAID, never mind.
USAI.
The contracts have already been signed and technically paid for. It's important to find out whether or not those will need to be double paid or not. That's important to know.
And then, I assume not, but yeah.
And then the third thing, which is I think the most important, if US allows Ukraine or third parties to buy equipment, that's a major win.
I think that'd be fine. Yeah, I don't.
That would be fine.
I think it's just like we knew this anyway, right? The idea is that there's going to be no more aid for Ukraine. But I think the fact that Zelensky seems, and I could have got this wrong, but seems to have announced like we're not getting any more like free stuff, if you like. I think that's just this recognition that the US are now in this different era of this whole war, and so going back to what I was saying is that it's about Europe. So it's about the mobilization of Europe. Yeah, they're getting there, but there's still this issue with generating the money for the 150 billion euros of Ursula von der Leyen and rearming Europe. And then you've got Italy and Spain being really difficult. You've got France wanting to do their own thing. So there's still lots of things that need ironing out. But I think Starmer and Macron are good and strong leaders, actually, who are going to be competent. They're just reliable. And we talked about the other night with the warmth that you see between those leaders, between Zelensky and Macron, Zelensky and Starmer. There's this, that they are good moral people who have Ukraine's best interests at heart. Like really, I believe that, and you can feel it. And actually, that means a lot to me. Like I feel safe, and I think Zelensky feels safe in the European environment, and he doesn't feel safe in the American environment. And so, how did Ukraine find a way out of this? Through Europe, somehow through Europe, it has to be. But the question always comes back to what is it that the US would do if they were spurned by Ukraine? Will they join Russia? Will they do things to help Russia? What is it that they hold over Ukraine? What kind of intelligence sharing do they have, or whatever it is that Ukraine desperately need and can't do without, if that's true?
Absolutely, Johnny Pierce. Operator Starsky, realistic paths forward.
The most realistic thing that I can see right now, because this is something that we are planning to do, for example, with my brigade, is that we should consider the fact that soon we will face shortage of 155mm shells, and we should prepare to be able to supply my brigade specifically with attack drones. And this is something that we're looking forward to do. So Europe is 100% able to supply Ukraine. Eventually, it will take time and unfortunately many casualties. But recently I had this interview with General Ben Hodges, where he said that eventually Europe will be able to do that. Again, looking at Ukraine, that stopped Russia without any support for the first several months. They were able to fight back and basically stop Russia. So I think this is something we're talking about in terms of like long range perspective. Short range perspective, we need more drones. Therefore, the best way to make sure that Russians will run out of their personnel is to donate for drones for the Ukrainian army. And this is something I would really, really like to call our viewers to do, if you can. So drones for Ukrainian army, they will not supplant the artillery 100%. Like, it's impossible. There are cases when we need dumb shell that literally flies on a parabolic trajectory and hits the target. But we need to develop the ways to overcome such challenges. So this is something very, very important. We will need more drones very, very soon.
Absolutely. And also, in addition to the drones, we are also supplying Ukraine with trucks. I'm going to shout that out really quick right now, if I so could, to the panel. Easter truck fundraiser. I'm also on it with JP and Georgie from Ukraine Matters here. And we're doing well, 8,619. We had 2 donations during the stream from Alan and Andrew. Big donations. Thank you so much. We're almost complete. Let me just scroll down without getting you guys too dizzy. Let's go to the bottom. Thank you again, Andrew and Alan. Can I pull up the full one for you guys now? Let me switch this.
I haven't even started. I've just been finishing a NAFO one, so I haven't even started. Yeah.
It's all good. We got you. Drinking Georgie got his truck done in 3 seconds. So, I mean, look at that. So there's our overall fundraiser, you guys. Overall, again, I'm going to be hosting a more chill panel later on with some other fellas that are a part of this fundraiser with us to help boost some of their efforts. So look forward to that later on. But thank you to everybody for contributing. And here are the total fundraisers, which again, Ukraine Matters at 12,587 euro. We're at 8,500. You got Suchomimus at 6,000. Renegade Chungus and Canty are at 4,000. You got Rick the Ukrainian up there, Silicon Curtin, Jonathan Fink. You got the Shills, and then there's ATP Johnny Geopolitics there at 250.
Don't
Rockin'.
you worry. I'm gonna smash that. So if I haven't even announced this yet, I'd sort of announce at the end of a live stream.
Exactly. I think I'm seeing people drop some funds in some of these ones because they're growing too, which is really good to see. So we're ready for you, JP. You passed me last time.
Bring it on, Muddy Funster.
Yeah, Georgie passed me really quick this time. All right. Closing statements and closing remarks. I'll just call on you one by one, and then also promote anything that you have. Promote your YouTube channel, your fundraisers. Dylan, definitely please your documentary. Let's go one by one. Let's start with Greg Terry. Closing statement.
Thank you, guys. Thank you to all of you. Consider your friends, and it's been a joy to be here for a few hours. And I think we've shared a lot of relevant, accurate information. But Johnny popping here at the end, he's my buddy. It's always nice to see him. But I think, you brought a word in, Johnny, because I was going to say something different because I knew the closing round was coming. First of all, thank you, all the community. That's what's most important, because without you, it would just be us 6 guys talking to each other. And together, we're stronger. We're making a difference together. This is a global effort, a global community, and I'm grateful for each and every one of you. If you're sitting there watching on a phone right now, you're watching on a tablet, you're watching on your TV, your computer, you're watching live or later, we say thank you. Share, like, subscribe to everybody's channel, share it on your social media, because it's really grassroots effort to get the truth out there. And I appreciate so much each and every one of these content creators, respect them and support them. I watch all their stuff as much as I can, and you need to as well. So now, with that said, for my closing statement, Johnny Pierce, I think you said one word that I want to make my closing statement. And that is going forward from this moment, because a lot has happened in the last 24 hours. I mean, I just put a video out of, and I translated from Russian into English, Putin's yellow submarine little chat with his buddies on the nuclear sub he was christening, where he basically said, we're looking and we're going to work with our friends. It may or may not include the U.S., but it will include China and India and South Africa and any of the BRICS nations. And then he said, and of course, our great friend North Korea, they have to be involved in this with negotiations and with the path forward. I mean, just pure trash. So the word you used, Johnny, was this. You said we need competent leadership. So that's what I want to close with. My last statement is that's exactly what we need, because there is a lot changing over the last 2 or 3 days. And I think even over the next 4 or 5 days, when we start getting the refusal of the mineral agreement officially, which I believe will happen, and we begin to see there's going to be some statements made and changes made, because obviously there is no ceasefire. We've already known that. There never was a ceasefire. Dnipro tonight being absolutely demolished right now. And I feel it, man. I just feel it. There's going to be some major adjustments coming one way or the other in regard to maybe American perspective, Ukrainian perspective, EU showing up stronger. I don't know, but we're going to see some changes, and what we need is competent leadership. So
Absolutely.
it's my word to close out: competent.
And how can the viewers find you again?
Greg Terry Experience. If you don't find me there, I'll typically be arguing with Johnny Pierce on a live.
And speaking of Johnny Pierce, closing statements.
Do you know what? I'm glad you picked up on that word, Greg, because actually, honestly, I think it's kind of undervalued at the moment. Like, and I don't want to keep picking on the US, but there's such an important component of this, that you just want competence. There's just quiet competence. I don't care if you don't have the charisma of like a superstar, like someone like Keir Starmer. Okay, but just standing up and just saying the right things. There's a lot to be said for just we take for granted people that are going to say, yeah, I support Ukraine, like very robustly and loudly. But actually, we shouldn't take that for granted because it's not happening in certain places where it bloody should. And I guess my closing statement is that, not that my opening almost, we are entering a new era of world politics where and Jim Hines said this. So a Democrat senator said it in the House Intelligence Committee or the Senate Intelligence Committee, where they were giving John Ratcliffe and Tulsi Gabbard a hard time the other day. And he said, he pulled up this report and he said, look, we've got to this point where we've changed sides. So when you've got like an American politician saying, look, it looks like we've changed sides and we're on Russia's side, then take that seriously, right? Put partisan politics aside. Well, it's pretty difficult, but I think we're in a period where the US has aligned itself with this axis of evil. And this is an inflection point in history. We keep saying that, but it really is an inflection point. And it's going to be tough because we supporters of Ukraine, could be in a situation where we're supporting Ukraine and now we're against the US in quite a formal way. And then when you look at Canada and Greenland and all this other stuff, you're thinking, it's crazy times. So, we need to stay united. Europe needs to stay united. Sorry to be so Europe-centric here, but we need to be united behind Ukraine because that is now the strongest hope for, I say Europe and Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, etc. But Europe needs to stay really united behind Ukraine because that's where the hope is at the moment.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, JP. Let's go with Dylan Burns.
So there was many points when I went kind of quiet because I felt this sinking feeling in my chest. It was probably most eminent, most powerful on the night of the election. Anybody watch my stream could tell I was a little quiet as I was trying to think out all the scenarios in my head. I was like, where do we go from here? And, well, that doesn't work. So could we go that route would hit that at dead end. And I got more and more quiet throughout the night going through these scenarios. And all of the positive scenarios seemed to close off more and more and more as I started to see that cabinet form. And when I heard that Tulsi actually was going to get confirmed, and she did, that was a moment for me where I thought that it's really hard to get out of this box where Trump is going to undercut Ukraine, because the only way you can get Trump on Ukraine's side is that there's smart people around him who can let him know how it's in his interest, how it's in his interest to support Ukraine. And all the people around him who are of this mentality, which the people that I heard from Ukrainians who kind of wanted to roll the dice on Trump, or Americans who talked about rolling the dice on Trump. Michael Waltz was one of those people, the guy who added the dude from the Signal scandal. That was supposed to be one of our Ukraine saviors, and he is somebody who's added on to the lecturing when it comes to Ukraine. Keith Kellogg, he's the actual envoy. He described Ukrainians after aid was cut off of like a barnyard animal that needed to be beaten into submission, when he compared them to a donkey needing to be hit with a 2x4 in comparison to the aid cut off. Tulsi Gabbard as top intelligence head pick. I'm sorry, I just can't get over that. I every time I remember that, I want to have an aneurysm. But all these people, Marco Rubio, who we get reports of, even though he supports Ukraine, he has some of the least influence of the administration. He's hearing about decisions after they're made. So all these people who were supposed to be the ones that people were holding out for either have lost influence, or I feel that for their either personal political careers or in order to capture the favor of the president, they've performatively leaned in Trump's direction. Both Marco Rubio, Keith Kellogg, Michael Waltz, you hear them all talking about the need for Ukraine to be thankful, the need for Zelensky, wear a suit, all of this in order to gain Trump's favor. So until we make it rewarding to support Ukraine, which there is popular consensus reasons to support Ukraine, but until we make it rewarding in Trump's court politics and his system of court gestures and cabinet meetings and him watching Marco Rubio and Elon Musk fight for his amusement, like he's watching a tennis match, his eyes bouncing back and forth between these people bickering over layoffs. The only way is going to be to convince him that it's within his own interest. And that is going to be an incredibly difficult task. And so we need to prepare for the externality where that's just not possible, because the president is just learning about Iranian drones. The president is continuing to lie about the encirclement in Kursk, even though we have exclusive reports from Reuters knowing that he's been briefed that it isn't real. He's choosing Putin's word in private meetings over the intelligence of the American intelligence community, which should be no surprise to anybody who remembers the Helsinki meeting. You know, I mean, and we had plenty of time to proof aid and to prepare for this. I think that a lot of Europeans and a lot of people who were preparing for this, though, just continued to hold out and hope for the outcome where we wouldn't have to deal with the MAGA movement during the war. And sadly, this just was not the case, and now we have to deal with that reality. As for any shout outs, I have two things coming out. I have an article next week with Offbeat Research where I actually released my interview with that defector from the 155. He was one of the guys who defected while in France. He explains the reasons that led to his decision, since he was actually a volunteer in helping the Ukrainian military with aid and stuff before he got drafted off the street. So I think it's a really revealing experience, and I think we can take a lot from it to learn on the improvements we can make in the armed forces to make sure that manpower is retained and to make sure that, you know, these lives are preserved because they're valuable, and we want to protect as many souls as possible. As for the other thing, my Hereson documentary is coming out this Sunday. It's over an hour long. We have 100% original 100% original soundtrack. We have Ukrainian folk music performed by Ukrainian musicians. We have really good, I think, tension, ambience music made by some pretty good electronic musicians, and tons of testimony and presenting of footage of Russian targeting of civilians in Kherson, including ambulance drivers that have been targeted, victims who have been injured and had their legs maimed. And we really just want to add to that historical record. So if people want to check that out, it's going to be this Sunday at Dylan Burns TV on YouTube, DylanBurns TV.
Thank you, Dylan. Let's go with Georgie from Ukraine Matters.
Maybe Greg.
I know we're closing out.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No,
Greg,
you're cool.
responded to Dylan.
I've already given my final statement, but I just wanted to say I appreciate what Dylan just said, because he nailed it. You absolutely nailed it, sir. Because some of the hope that we had, as you say, I was watching, I was sick to my stomach. Then the cabinet was being filled. Okay, well, so we're going to have a hope in Rubio, who years ago was smashing communism and smashing Russia and smashing Putin. And now I don't even know where he's at. He's gone. And that is the Secretary of the State, the Secretary of State of the United States. It is his job to go sit with Vladimir Putin. It is his job to go. Okay, so kudos to you. And Mike Waltz, kudos to you, Dylan. I'm a conservative, man, but I'm not a MAGA. I'm just a conservative Christian guy fighting for truth, trying to bring people together. And dude, you smashed it. And I just wanted to give you a shout out, bro. Spot on.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Georgie from Ukraine Matters, final statements.
Yeah. So I'm going to take like a different type of pivot, because like I think a lot have been really good things said already. I always continue repeating on my channel that, and why my channel is actually, and why I'm myself also this a little bit of a silly guy, like the making some stupid joke, making stupid things and so on, is because what is happening right now is probably one of the worst things that I've ever imagined in my life. Like I was never even thinking that I can go through something like this. And a lot of people are in the same position. I'm pretty sure no one was expecting they're going to end up in a situation and that their life going to throw such a big punches at them, and that there's going to be like world full of tragedy and suffering. It is important to remember that the person that doesn't fight doesn't win. And Ukrainians have understood there, and we talked a little bit previously talking about that there is no option right now, because the only argument people say like for surrendering is saying is like, well, this is going to stop the killing. Well, it's not, because we already know that it's not. Russians, when they entered the cities that they captured, they entered there with kill lists. They entered there and they started torturing population. They started committing genocide, cultural, ethnic cleansing. So it's not going to stop the killing. The surrendering is not an option, because it's only going to remove killing from the TV. And that's, I mean, like if you're okay lying to yourself, that's fine, but I'm not. So the only way is continue fighting. And fighting is a marathon, it's not a race. And that's why preserving your sanity is crucial. Like Merc, while I'm talking, can you bring up your donation page and so on just one more time? Because we need to understand that every day that you're still in this, every day that you're continuing supporting Ukraine, whether you have disposable income or you just message your direct representative, you continue the fight, you continue supporting Ukraine, every single day of that matters more than anything else. Ukraine cannot rely on people that don't understand what's happening in Ukraine, people that just learn that there are Shahid drones and so on. But the issue is that a lot of those people, we look at what's happening in Ukraine, and then when we are hit by that wave of stupidity, I often talk about Trump and his administration consuming all of the oxygen in the room when we're talking about it, we get additional pressure on our mental health. And that can turn us off. That can really, really turn us off. That's why I want to underscore and finish off with this, that despite the fact that Trump is the head of US, very important figure, US influence on the war is significant, and they can definitely do a lot of damage if they start supporting Russia. True that. But they're not the ones that are deciding this war. They're not the ones that are the agents of this war. It doesn't matter that much, to be honest, what Trump administration does, do, say, act, what stupid Russian propaganda they regurgitate. You don't need to go all in on all of that. Acknowledge that, realize that, go forward, and that's the way that to preserve your sanity. Because your sanity, what is mattering, your support for Ukraine is what matters. And ultimately, I'm not sure, can you scroll down to the bottom of the page, Merc?
Yep, of course.
I talk with a lot of Ukrainians, and they say that sometimes what you see right here before you is what matters the most. When they learn all of this support, the warm words you leave, they read through all of this. The people that receive the trucks, people that are participating in campaign, in my campaign specifically, they're saying, oh my God, I never knew that there is so many good people that are still supporting Ukraine, and we are so grateful for that. So support Ukraine, preserve your sanity, and don't fall in the trap of weird despair and constant pressure for all sources.
Thank you so much, Georgie. Let's go, last but not least, Operator Starsky.
Thank you, brother. Very inspirational speech, Georgie. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody else. Thank you, the panel, for your inspiration. I would also like to inspire and motivate our amazing viewers just a bit, because we have almost 600 absolutely amazing and brave and decent people watching this chat. And 600 men and women, that is a legit battalion. And if you served in the army, you know that battalion is a power. Battalion can do a lot on the battlefield. We're talking about tens of kilometers of front line, of the span of the front line. And speaking of Russian threat, we should never forget about Russian informational threat, because this is something that basically brought beautiful and amazing individuals like Tulsi Gabbard and Donald Trump to power today. People who literally don't know how to use a freaking messenger. So we must always remember about this threat as well, and what you can do as people who watch such streams, such podcasts, is literally like and share and subscribe to the channels. When you see videos posted by Georgie, by Andrew, by Gregory, Dylan, and Jonathan, please remember that you have a possibility, a capability to turn 600 people into 60,000 people easily by literally sharing this word, by helping Ukraine be heard. So thank you so much. Always remember about this. And as always, thank you for supporting Ukraine, because this is the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. Before we end today's panel, I just want to thank each and every one of our guests, Operator Starsky, Dylan Burns, Georgie from Ukraine Matters, Greg Terry, Johnny Pierce from ATP Geopolitics, for bringing their insight, honesty, and perspective to the conversation. To everybody watching, the war is still very real. The headlines might fade, but the missiles haven't stopped. The soldiers haven't gone home. The people of Ukraine are still fighting, not just for their survival, but for democracy, sovereignty, and freedom. If you take one thing from tonight, let it be this: your voice matters. What you share, who you support, where you put your time, your energy, and even your dollars, it all makes a difference. Please don't forget about our Easter truck fundraiser, you guys. Link is in the description. It's in the chat. This is real support for real people making a real difference. Link is in the chat in the description. Thank you for being here. Be safe, stay informed, and as always, Slava Ukraine. All right. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm releasing you. You're free to go.